Hello, and welcome to the Catching the Octopus podcast. Here, we will explore how connecting inward gives us an advantage outward. We openly talk about the obstacles and challenges and difficulties that life throws our way and how they become moments of gratitude and things that can benefit us when we look back on our lives. I'm your host, Niomi Hurley, and it is my mission to bring you top quality guests that will share with you openly their obstacles and also the techniques they use to go inward that strengthens the way that they serve themselves and others at the highest level. Thank you for joining. Let's get started. Welcome to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. Now, in today's episode, we're going to have a chat about the interview with Grant Gilmour. So Grant Gilmour, owner of Gilmour Plumbing and Gas, jumped on with us and had an interview. And it was great the way he spoke about how he grew his team and how he managed his team and how he gets the best out of his team. And the key element for me out of the interview that I picked up was the workplace psychological safety. So the way Grant has gone about structuring his team probably wasn't purposefully to set up a place that was psychologically safe for his employees, but just naturally and organically, the way he leads and the way he has grown his team has done just that. And I've done a little bit of work with Grant and his team, and I can see that he's walking the walk, right? Not just talking the talk. And his team members are really cohesive and do get along really well. And he's growing a space that's really not just a workplace for them, but also a place where they can go and, work together to achieve common objectives and common goals. Now, a space, a workplace that is psychologically safe is one that's set up where people can be their authentic selves, is one where people are able to do what they need to do at work without suffering burnout, without second guessing themselves, without having to always go for guidance and asking questions or being criticized when they're making mistakes, right? A workplace that is psychologically safe allows people to become and present in the way they need to get the work done and be confident in doing so, right? Be confident in speaking up when things don't look right. Be confident in giving suggestions and feedback when asked. And one of the things that Grant spoke about was the communication that he has with his team. Now, Grant is an extremely good communicator and has a really high level of emotional intelligence. So for him, leadership probably comes as second nature, right? But he's giving his team the ability to come forward with different elements of feedback and being able to include them in the growth of the business and have them give input into how things are done, how they can be done better, and how improvements can be made. And one of the little tips that Grant has is at their toolbox meeting, he actually splits the group up into smaller groups, right? So instead of having the big group there and asking them questions and getting them to respond, and as most of us know, when we're in toolbox meeting environments, that's not an easy thing to do, right? Because people become apprehensive about sharing. Not everyone likes to speak up in front of the whole group. So what he does is he actually breaks them into smaller groups, which I think is mint. And by breaking them into smaller groups, it changes the energy around their input, right? And it's just a one-on-one conversation that they have with each other about whatever he's seeking feedback on, whether that be a project that they've just completed and how they could do that better, or whether it's some changes that are happening in the organization and he's seeking their input on how to do that well. Whatever that looks like, having that one-on-one conversation creates a more safe space for them to be able to share what they're thinking and the ideas that they have. And then once they've done that, then they all get together in a collective space to discuss. And that's how he gets the really great things out of his toolbox meetings. Now, some companies I've assisted with toolbox meetings, there can be up to 20 people, which can make it a bit tricky. But if you allocate, 5 or 10 minutes in your toolbox to actually just pair them off, does a huge range of things. So one, we've already talked about the benefits of the communication, but two, it also helps and improves rapport, right? Because it helps build relationships between different people, and you can pair them up randomly, or you can get them to pair up themselves. You can give them criteria. Okay, pair up with someone you haven't worked with in the last 2 weeks, right? Or been on a job with. So you can create that diversity as well within your work team and celebrate that. And three, it also just gives that forum. It gives that space where people feel safe to be able to contribute. And I think that is just a key element of creating a psychologically safe workspace. So as well as like the communication, he also spoke about, getting the team members to ask when they need to feel comfortable coming to him and asking questions that they need answers to, asking if they need time off to spend time for family events or, school assemblies or medical appointments or anything like that. He's telling them to come and ask beforehand so it can be planned into the schedule, right? To give them that ability to have some work-life balance. He also talked about with communication, setting expectations. And setting expectations, not just for the team, but also in other relationships that he has. He even spoke in his personal relationships, sitting down. And that's how he says, attributes to his successful marriage is sitting down and talking about what expectations each other have. What goals do they want to achieve? What do they want to achieve together? What do they want to achieve individually? And just talking about life in general. So when that comes into the workplace, the same elements can be applied, talking about what the expectations that each person has from each other, whether that's from a leader down to an employee or whether that's from an employee up to a leader. Right? We often miss that element of how important it is to give employees a voice on what they expect from the leader in their team, how they can best be managed, how they can best be communicated to, and also the goals of the organization as well, and of the team, and again of the individual. A good leader will know what goals their team members have, and where possible will be helping move them towards those goals. I think Richard Branson, now I've got to probably stuff this quote up, but I think he said, train people so that they can leave and then treat them in a way so they don't. Right? So train and grow your people to a space where they could leave and get any job. But if you treat them in the right way, they're not going to, right? They're going to stay. And then you have higher trained and more capable people within your team. And then just the business in general. Communication is key. And a couple of weeks ago, I was delivering workplace psychological safety workshops to a local site. And one of the elements when I asked the team, what does this company do that fits into this model? One of the things that they raised was the general manager or the general manager operations openly has, I forget what they called them, but like a town hall meeting, right? Where he'll actually go and speak to all of the groups and just tell them how the business is going, what it's got on, the horizon, how it's been performing, all of those sorts of things that, employees don't really need to know to be able to do their job. But it inspires them to know, right? Because they feel included and they feel like they're valued and part of that process. He also spoke about some tips for growing a business, which I thought was great. Thanks, Grant. And what he spoke about was wanting your business to grow and how you can help it grow. And for him, a key element was business coaching. So he has a business coach that he talks with and brings up the problems within the business that are happening and gets an external perspective. And he also spoke about, conversations that him and I have, and he has probably with other people, where we'll just be talking about general stuff in our businesses. And he'll come up with an idea and go, hey, Gnomes, you thought about this? Or I might come up with an idea and go, hey, Grant, have you thought about this? And a lot of the time we haven't. Right? Because getting that external perspective from someone that's not in amongst it, someone that's observing it, someone that's actually just listening and piecing things together can at times be invaluable, right? It's an observer perspective. It's that third person perspective as someone that's not involved in it, not invested in it, that can see things more clearly. And I think that is a really great tool to have. And I know for myself, I have different people I turn to for that coaching space as well, for just soundboarding, coming up with solutions to different problems. And for Grant, he's got someone that's not in his industry, which is really helpful. And I've recently participated in the Southwest Leaders Program as a mentor, and that program is set up on the same foundation. So Jeff Stewart, and there's an interview with Jeff Stewart if you want to go check that out. So Jeff Stewart kind of came up with this program that was initially set up to get people out of the police force paired up with someone outside of that organization, right? So for some mentoring and menteeing, so that they could actually see what life was like outside of the police force, and other people could come and, contribute with their viewer kind of suggestions. And that's now expanded, and there's a few different service industries that are included in that. So I think the fire department might be included, maybe the ambulance, don't quote me on that one, but definitely the police force. Fire and emergency services, I think I might have mentioned that, but they're all included, and they pair up with different businesses and industry, right? So there's different perspectives coming in, which is just mint. And sometimes I feel like we turn to people within our industry for guidance and advice, and we miss the value that comes from seeking that outside of the organization or outside of the industry. Someone with fresh eyes and a fresh perspective.
If you're enjoying this podcast and you want Niomi or any of her guests featured on your podcast or as a keynote speaker at your next event, you'll find their contact details included in the show notes. If you'd like to learn more about how you can work with Niomi individually or as part of your strategy to improve leadership in your business, then review the courses, offers and services at getupandgrowconsulting.com.au.
The top tip, though, that Grant gave was systemisation and automation, right? He talked about how that works and how that's helped him grow his business. One of the key elements it's done is allowed him to step aside and work on it rather than in it. And as a business owner, that's key to not only being able to grow your business, but to be able to have a work-life balance, to be able to do things like setting up a psychologically safe space, and to be able to see things without being stuck in amongst daily operation, have more vision, have more strategic direction. And so when he did look at doing the systemization and the automation, he actually found there were other benefits as well, right? So the way the system's set up, now his admin staff, if a client rings and has a query or they need to query a job, they can go into the system and there's all the job notes there. So they don't have to be calling people out on a job, stopping them from working, interrupting their flow, when they can just find out the information themselves. And it just makes everything run smoother. It also helps empower people, right? Because information, knowledge is power. But when I say that, I don't mean it's a save the information because that'll make you more powerful. But what I do mean is when we in our roles can find the information we need to get our jobs done without having to go to the boss or the leader, then that empowers us, right? That empowers us to be able to show up in a really effective space. It allows us to go and make decisions and do things on our own backs. And that gives a lot of job satisfaction and helps with that empowerment space. So Grant also touched on work-life balance, which was really great, and just talked about, scheduling in time that you need to schedule in for your own personal things. So he talked about picking his daughter up, and those days are penciled in. Everyone knows that that's when he leaves work on those days, right? And there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. There's always going to be something from time to time that's going to happen that's going to require our attention as a leader. But if we can set things up, with the right systems, the right automations, the right workplace psychological safety, the right empowerment for our people, then we have the ability to step away and do that work that feeds our soul, or do those activities that feeds our soul. And for Grant, the space where he's actually turning inward and fulfilling that inner space is when he's with his family. right? Or when he's with his friends, when he's entertaining. He's quite a social being. So those things are really, really important to him. And if he wasn't able to fulfill those, then he's not able to show up in the best space as a leader for his team. Also, he talked about the responsibility around money and how at a young age he learned that. And if anyone in or out of business knows, when we're young, we can make some really silly financial mistakes, but that's where he got his gold, right? That's what he reviewed on to be able to make, different growth spaces with finances in his mind, which now helps him have the right capital, cash flow, all of those sorts of things and budgeting and forecasting within his own business now. And I thought that was a great example to make because I've been there too. I've done some really silly things financially, especially when I was younger. He also spoke about, team building within his team and setting up, a great space for the people to be able to get to know each other. And, that is done through the toolboxes and the small groups he splits them up into. But he spoke about doing, activities outside of work that can assist with that team building. And we don't often do it enough. And I think, he said, used to be going drinking, everyone just go and have drinks, but the world of work is changing and our own worlds are changing. And although that's still a great space for people to relax and start showing their personality and build relationships and rapport, it's also really handy to go and do different activities. And he asks his team for suggestions, which then often showcases some of their abilities, right? So someone who plays golf might say we should go on a golf day, and then they would be like, hey, didn't realize you were that good at golf. Where did that come from? Right. And creates a deeper understanding of each other. Or it could be, it was an example in the podcast, but in the interview, but what I'm coming up with, it could be tennis. Right. It could be squash, round robin of squash. It might not even be sports if you don't want it to be. It could be going in and seeing a show of some sort or going and participating in, I don't know, go to the Dolphin Discovery Center, have a look at the aquarium, whatever it is, right? It's something that they can do as a team, which takes them out of the workspace, which allows them to have fun together and get to know each other. And if you know Grant, there's definitely a quirky side to him and he is fun, right? He's, and that allows everyone to go back to their inner child. And I'll just touch on that because everyone has that inner child. And as we go through our corporate space or as we go into business, a lot of the times we tend to suppress that, right? Because it's not the right environment to show up in that space. Or I need to go and perform at this level, or I need to go and showcase this side of myself. But having the ability to let out that inner child from time to time is not only magical for our own growth, but it's a really great way of getting to know the people around you, right? You get to see the human side of them. What really makes them tick? What's really in there internally? So I think that's just brilliant, the way that he's been doing that as well. So I think that pretty much sums up with the notes I've got, my interview with Grant. But I would just like to add that at the commencement of the interview, I introduced and said that we met in a business networking group, and I've met some great people through that group, Grant being one of them. And I really appreciate when I get to build these relationships that help me not just professionally, but personally as well. And I know that when I've been chatting with Grant, yes, we talk about business, but sometimes we'll talk about our families as well. I've met his beautiful wife, Chloe. She's amazing. I've met his daughter, Olivia. I've met their dog, all of these sorts of things. Building this rapport and relationships helps strengthen the connection, right? And that way we actually feel like we know and trust these people. And when it comes to business, we tend to do business with the people that we know and trust. And networks is not just setting up networks, going to different programs, meeting different people, whether it be the chamber or a BNI or whatever group it is. They're not always there just to enhance your business, right? That might be the goal that gets you through the door, But there's so much more to connecting with people. There's so much more that we can get on an inner level, right? That can help us just become better people, just become better versions of the people that we are. And sometimes just make us smile, which is really important too. So if you haven't already, as I say in every recap, go back, have a listen to the episode and the interview with Grant. It was a great interview and I really appreciated him joining on. And I look forward to serving you again in our next episode. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining in and listening to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. It's been great having you here. And if you'd like to go and like and subscribe and maybe even leave a 5-star rating if you think it's worth it, I'd really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.